I arrived at my parents' 25th wedding anniversary dinner only to find my chair taken by my brother's new girlfriend, a woman nobody had mentioned until 40 minutes before the reservation. My mother told me to find somewhere to stand, so I did. I stood up, walked to the valet, and took the $4,200 cashier's check I had brought as their gift straight back to my car. Leaving them with a 12-person bill and zero explanation was the first time in 32 years I had ever chosen myself. But that was only the beginning. My right wrist was wrapped in a tensor bandage, the kind you get from the sports medicine clinic on Bloor when the physiotherapist wants you to rest for 6 weeks and you nod, and then immediately go back to working 10-hour days. I had fractured it 2 months earlier, slipping on black ice while carrying my mother's groceries up her front steps because she didn't want to risk ruining her new boots. She had sent me a voice message afterwards. "Hope you feel better soon, sweetie. Can you still make the dinner on the 14th? I had said yes. Of course I had said yes. I got dressed that night in a way that felt like armor. Dark emerald blazer, tailored trousers, heels I had no business wearing with a healing wrist throwing off my balance. The restaurant was Castello on King West, the kind of place where the bread costs $12 and you need a contact to get a reservation on a Saturday. I had the contact. I was the contact. I had booked the private dining room 4 months in advance, coordinated the menu with the chef personally, and pre-ordered a bottle of Burgundy that my father had mentioned once, maybe twice, over the last decade, because I write things like that down in my phone, things my family says they want, things they forget they ever said the moment someone else needs something. I had also put together a gift, not flowers, not a card, a cashier's check for $4,200 meant to cover the refundable deposit on a rail trip from Vancouver to Halifax. My parents had talked about the Canadian for as long as I could remember. The train, the mountains, the dining car, the way the prairies go on forever. They had never gone. There was always something. Usually my brother. His name is Callum. He is 28, 3 years younger than me, and he has the kind of easy confidence that people mistake for competence. He is handsome in a way that photographs well. He has also been between jobs for the better part of 2 years, borrowed money from my parents that quietly became borrowed money from me when my parents ran short, and has never once remembered my birthday without a Facebook notification prompting him. I loved him the way you love someone you grew up with, which is to say, complicated and mostly out of habit. When I arrived at Castello, the hostess smiled and led me toward the private room. I could already hear my parents through the frosted glass divider. Laughter, the clink of ice. I came around the corner and saw 4 people at a table set for 4. My mother, Sylvia, in a dress I recognized because I had been with her when she bought it. My father, Raymond, in the blazer he always wore to anything he considered an occasion. Callum, leaning back in his chair like he had built the restaurant himself. And in the 4th seat, my seat, the one I had specifically noted in the reservation as needing a chair without armrest because my wrist couldn't manage the angle, sat a woman I had never seen before. She was young, maybe 23, wearing a satin bodycon dress that was very much not Castello appropriate, holding a glass of the Burgundy I had pre-ordered. "Jade," Callum said, waving vaguely at me. "This is my sister. Her name's Sorry. What do you want to eat? The waiter came by already." Jade gave a little wave and went back to her phone. I looked at the table, 4 chairs, 4 settings, no 5th. "Mom," I said carefully, "where am I sitting?" My mother looked at the table as though seeing it for the first time, which we both knew was not true. "Oh, we weren't sure you were coming," she said. "You're always so busy." "I organized this dinner." "I know, and we appreciate it," she said in the tone she uses when she is wrapping a dismissal in gratitude. "But Callum wanted to bring Jade, and you know how he gets. You don't mind standing for a bit, do you? Your father can ask if there's a stool at the bar." I looked at my wrist. I looked at Jade eating the bread I had selected from the menu. I looked at my brother, who had not gotten up, had not offered his chair, had not said a single word to acknowledge what was being asked of me. "It's one dinner," my father said, spreading his hands wide. "Don't be difficult, sweetheart." Don't be difficult. That phrase has followed me my entire life. Don't be difficult when Callan needs the car. Don't be difficult when your savings go toward his tuition shortfall. Don't be difficult when your mother forgets to tell the restaurant there are 5 of us, not 4, because your existence is an afterthought she genuinely didn't account for. I smiled. I don't fully know what was on my face in that moment, but it wasn't warmth. It was something else. Something that had been sitting at the bottom of me for a long time, quiet, waiting. You're right, I said. It's just a dinner. I reached into my blazer pocket. I set the envelope on the table, right in the middle, between the bread basket and the burgundy. I was going to give you that tonight, I said. $4,200, the deposit on the Canadian. Vancouver to Halifax. You've wanted to do it for years. My mother's hand moved toward the envelope. I picked it back up. But since there's no room for me here, I said, tucking it back against my ribs, I'll hold on to it for somewhere I'm actually expected. I turned and walked out before any of them found their words. My father called my name twice. My mother made a sound I had heard before, not distress, exactly, more like inconvenience. The cold air outside hit me hard. I stood on the sidewalk on King West at 7:30 on a February Saturday and let myself shake for exactly 30 seconds. Then I called a car and got in. What they didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone, was that the situation at Costello was the smallest of the fires burning that night. 3 weeks before the dinner, I had pulled my credit report. I do it quarterly, a habit from when I was 24 and working at a financial planning firm downtown. It's the kind of thing that sounds tedious until the day it saves you. On this particular Tuesday, I sat in my apartment with a mug of tea going cold and stared at a number that made no sense. My credit utilization had jumped 11 points. There were 2 inquiries I didn't recognize, and there was a line of credit I had never opened. It took me 4 days and 3 calls to 2 different institutions to understand what had happened. My father had co-signed a line of credit in my name 18 months ago. He had my SIN number. I had given it to him years earlier for a family RRSP consolidation that never happened. He had answered the security questions correctly because they were the standard ones: mother's maiden name, childhood street, first pet. Things he knew. Things I had never thought to change because who changes their security questions against their own father? The line of credit had a balance of $23,000. I sat with that number for a long time. $23,000 was my emergency fund. It was the amount I had spent 2 years rebuilding after I paid for Callum's last failed business venture, the meal kit startup that lasted 4 months and left 6 of his friends unpaid. My parents had asked me to cover it. They said it would ruin Callum's reputation if it came out he couldn't pay his people. I had said yes. Of course I had said yes. I did not confront my father immediately. The event planner, part of my brain. I run a small corporate events and hospitality consulting practice, mostly mid-sized tech firms and a few legal offices downtown, took over. Assess. Document. Move carefully. I called a friend who was a paralegal and asked her what I needed. Then I went to the dinner. When I got home that night, still in my blazer, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. I was not panicking. I was past panic. Panic is for when the thing hasn't happened yet. This had already happened. I was in resolution mode. I navigated to the website for my parents' building management company. My parents lived in a 2-bedroom unit in a mid-rise near Roncesvalles, one of the neighborhoods in the West End where the rents have climbed so fast that people who have lived there for decades can no longer afford to stay. My parents could not afford to stay. They hadn't been able to for 3 years. I had known this and said nothing and simply started covering the gap. $400 a month? Then $550 when the building raised rates last January. It came out of my account automatically on the 1st. I had set it up and then not thought about it because thinking about it made me feel something I didn't have language for at the time. I had language for it now. I was listed as the guarantor on their lease. When they'd applied 3 years ago, their income and credit hadn't cleared the building's threshold. Mine had. The lease renewal was due in 11 days. I moved the mouse over the button that said Submit Renewal Intent, and I didn't click it. I closed the laptop and went to bed. My phone started going at 9 the next morning. My mother, my father, then Callum, which surprised me because Callum historically does not engage with conflict until it affects him directly. I let it all go to voicemail and drove to my office. At 11, I got a text from my father that said, "Audrey, you need to call us back. This is not funny." He had used my name. He does that when he wants to signal seriousness. It usually works. I looked at the text for a long moment and then put my phone face down and went back to my venue contract. At 2 in the afternoon, he showed up at my building. My office is a converted loft space near Liberty Village that I share with two other small firms. There's a glass door at the front with a buzzer. My father stood outside it in his winter coat, his breath making small clouds. He did not look angry. He looked the way he looks when he has been told to look a certain way. I let him in. I brought him to the small meeting room with the round table. I did not offer coffee. "Last night was a misunderstanding," he started. "I know about the line of credit," I said. He stopped. A long pause. The radiator ticked. "That was a loan," he said. "We were going to pay it back. Callum needed capital." "You used my SIN number and my identity without my consent," I said. "That is fraud. I have already spoken to someone about what that means legally, and I need you to understand that I am telling you this not to threaten you, but because I want you to understand what the situation actually is." He put his head in his hands. He said something about Callum's debts, about pressure, about not having any other options. I had heard versions of this before. The details changed, but the structure was always the same, something Callum needed. No other way to get it. They had known I would understand. They were going to tell me when the time was right. "Who else knew?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment too long. "Mom knew," I said. It wasn't a question. He looked at the table. My mother had known. My mother, who had sat at dinner the night before and told me to stand in the corner of a restaurant I had booked and paid for, who had turned toward the envelope on the table before I picked it up. My mother had known for 18 months that my credit was being used as a float for my brother's nonsense and had said nothing, and had continued calling me on Sundays to ask how work was going, and had come to me twice in that same period, asking if I could possibly increase the monthly transfer because heating costs. I said, "I need you to get an independent account of the balance and transfers. I'll email you the information for the institution. You have until Friday to call them. If you don't, I will be making a report." He looked up. "You would do that to your own family." "You did it to yours," I said. He left without saying goodbye. I sat in the meeting room alone for a few minutes looking at the parking lot through the window. A pigeon was working at something on the pavement. The sky was the flat gray it gets in February, the kind of gray that has no opinion. Then I went back to my desk and didn't renew the lease. My mother called 47 times over the next 4 days. I know because I counted, not in real time but after, scrolling back through the notifications. She left voicemails, long ones, some tearful, some not. The tearful ones were about how she had sacrificed everything. The non-tearful ones were about what I owed her. My aunt sent a text calling me selfish. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in 3 years sent a Facebook message asking what I had done to my parents. My mother had posted, of course she had posted, a long status about a daughter who had turned cold, about how money changes people, about praying for healing in their family. The comments were full of women from her book club and her old neighborhood saying things like, "Stay strong," and some people just forget where they came from. I screenshotted the post. I added it to the folder I had been building. On day 5, I called my father, not my mother, my father on his cell at 7 in the morning before she would be up. He answered on the second ring, which told me he had been waiting. "Meet me at the Tim Hortons on Roncesvalles," I said. 8 o'clock, without Mom. He was already there when I arrived, in a window seat with a large coffee and the look of a man who has not slept well for nearly a week. I bought my own coffee and sat across from him. "I need to know how much of this she directed," I said. He looked out the window. "Dad." She found the bank information in my email, he said. She already knew about Callum's situation. She said we needed to act fast, that if we asked you, you would say no. Would I have said no? He was quiet. I would have said no to fraud, I said. I would have said yes to a conversation. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. He looked, in that moment, genuinely old in a way I hadn't noticed before. There's a version of this story where I feel sorry for him, where his weakness is something I can absorb into the general texture of my complicated feelings about my family and metabolize it quietly. I had done that my entire life. I was good at it. I was not going to do it anymore. There's something else, I said. I put my phone on the table and showed him the bank records my paralegal friend had helped me pull together. Among the transfers that had come out of the line of credit, money sent to Callum, to a numbered company I didn't recognize, there was one I had almost missed. $480 to something called Rosecliff Holdings on a date that corresponded exactly to when my mother had told me she was going up to a spa weekend in Muskoka with her friend from her old office. My father stared at the screen. She took a cut, I said, gently because even now I was trying to manage how the information landed. Not much, but she made sure there was something in it for her. He didn't say anything for a long time. The Tim Hortons around us did its morning business. Someone ordered a Timby's combo for a kid in a hockey jersey. The espresso machine made its noise. I didn't know that part, he said finally. I know, I said. That's why I'm telling you. He looked at me across the small table and I could see him assembling something, not an excuse for once, something closer to a reckoning. What do you need from me? He asked. I need you to come on Sunday, I said. My aunt is hosting the family dinner. Mom is planning to go. I need you to come with me and I need you to tell the truth. He flinched. She will never forgive me. She wasn't protecting you, I said. She was using you. You were the one who called the bank. You would have been the one facing consequences. She would have been the one on a spa weekend. He stared at his coffee. I'll be there, he said. Save me a seat. My aunt hosts the extended family dinner every February long weekend, the same way she has since before I was born. She lives in a semi-detached in the Danforth, the kind of house that always has too many coats in the front hallway and smells like something baking. Under normal circumstances, it is the one family event I actually enjoy. Decent wine, my aunt's Greek Canadian cooking, cousins who are at least diverting. This was not going to be normal circumstances. I arrived in a black wool coat and carrying a manila folder, which is not standard dinner party attire, but which felt necessary. My mother was already there when I walked in. I could hear her in the living room holding court. She had clearly been talking for a while. The room went a little quiet when I came through from the hallway. She turned and her expression moved through 3 or 4 things very fast before settling on wounded dignity. I didn't think you'd come, she said, loudly enough that everyone could hear, after everything. Hi, Mom, I said. I looked around the room. My aunt, 3 cousins, 2 cousins' partners, my uncle, my grandmother, and in the corner, already sitting down, my father, who met my eyes and gave me the smallest nod. Callum was not there. He had apparently driven to his friend's place in Kingston the day before. He had a gift for not being present when things became structural. Since everyone's together, I said, setting the folder on the side table, I think we should talk about what actually happened. My mother made a sound. There's nothing to discuss. You've already humiliated this family. The line of credit, I said, turning to the room. My name, my SIN number, $23,000. The room got quiet in a particular way, the kind of quiet that means everyone has been told one version and is now being asked to consider another. I went through it without drama. The credit inquiry, the timeline, the unauthorized application, the transfers. My father sat still and did not contradict me. When I got to the part about my father's role, the call to the bank, the security questions, I paused. Dad, I said. He stood up. He did not look at my mother. It's true, he said. His voice was hoarse but steady. I made the call. I used her information. I thought we were helping Callum. I was wrong. My mother turned on him immediately. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying, he said, and there was something in his voice I had not heard before, a kind of exhausted clarity. I know what I did, and I know what you told me to say to her. The room shifted. I could feel it, the slow tilt of a story being re-examined. I opened the folder. I put 2 pages on the coffee table. One was the bank record showing the transfer to Rosecliff Holdings. The other was a screenshot of an email my father had forwarded me the night before, my mother to him 8 months ago. Don't tell her yet. She'll pay it down anyway when she finds out. Just make sure the Rosecliff transfer goes through before she pulls the account. My mother looked at the papers. Then she looked at the room. Her sister. Her own mother. My grandmother, who was 91 and whose eyes had not left my mother's face since I started speaking. I deserve things too, my mother said. It came out smaller than she probably intended. I gave up a lot for this family. I deserve to have something of my own once in a while. No one in the room said anything. My aunt, who has known my mother since they were children, reached over and very quietly picked up the bank record and read it. Then she set it down. Sylvia, she said, I think you should go home. My mother left. Not dramatically, she picked up her coat and her bag and walked out, and the door closed behind her, and that was that. My father did not follow her. We had dinner, my aunt's lamb. My grandmother asked me twice how my wrist was healing, which was more times than my mother had asked in 2 months. The legal side of it took longer than the dinner. There were conversations with the bank's fraud department, paperwork, a letter from a lawyer my paralegal friend referred me to. In the end, the line of credit was closed and the liability was sorted in a way I am not going to go into detail about, except to say that it involved my father making a formal statement, and it took 4 months, and it cost me more in time and stress than in money, which is its own kind of loss. My parents separated in April. My father stayed in the city. He found a bachelor apartment near Keele and Eglinton, small and sensible, with a parking spot he didn't need because he sold the car. He got a part-time job at a building supply store. He sent me a check for $200 in June with a note that said first of many. I know it won't cover it, but it's a start. I deposited it. I texted him a thumbs up and then, after a moment, changed it to a proper message. Thanks, Dad. That counts. My mother went to stay with her sister in Barrie. She called me twice in the first month, both times to explain herself rather than to ask how I was. I listened the first time. The second time, I let it go to voicemail. She sent a birthday card in August with a Bible verse I had to look up, and when I did, it turned out to be about forgiveness, which I thought said a lot about where she was in the process. Callum texted me in October, a long message about how he hadn't known everything, how he wanted to make things right, how he was thinking of going back to school. I read it twice and then wrote back a single line, "When you have something concrete to show me, I'm here." He didn't respond, which was honest at least. The wrist healed in March. I celebrated by going to the climbing gym near my office, which I had been meaning to join for 2 years. The guy at the front desk gave me a beginner's pass and told me not to fall. I told him I was working on it. I still think about the dinner sometimes. The way my father looked at the papers at the Tim Hortons. The way my mother said, I deserve things too. And the room just went quiet. Not mean, just quiet. The way a room goes when something true and ugly gets said out loud for the first time. I organized that anniversary dinner because I had spent my whole adult life trying to prove something. That I was worth the seat. That if I gave enough, fixed enough, anticipated enough, eventually they would look at me the way I needed them to. It took standing in the doorway of a restaurant I had booked, with the cashier's check in my pocket and nowhere to sit, to understand that the proof was never the problem. The problem was the audience. I'm not bitter about it, or I am, a little, in the way that you hold bitterness in the same hand as gratitude, careful not to let either one drop. I am grateful for the clarity. I am grateful for my Aunt's lamb and my grandmother's attention and the paralegal friend who answered her phone on a Tuesday night. I am grateful for the climbing gym and the beginning passes and the incrementally larger checks arriving in my mailbox every 2 months from a man at a building supply store near Kiel and Eglinton who is trying, in the way that people try when it's almost too late, to earn back something that cannot be bought. Last November, I booked the Canadian. Just for me. Vancouver to Halifax, 10 days, a private room in the sleeper car. I watched the Rockies go by from a window seat with a coffee and nothing I needed to fix. The seat was mine. I had reserved it myself. There's a version of the story where I'm the villain. I know that because I've read my mother's Facebook post and she wrote it well. What I've come to understand, sitting with all of it over the months since, is that the outcome wasn't the result of one bad dinner or one fraudulent phone call to a bank. It was the result of a pattern that had been running for years, quietly, and the consequences landed where they did, because that's simply where the weight had been accumulating. My mother organized things a certain way. Who gave, who received, who was visible, who served, and she organized them so consistently that everyone involved, including me, stopped noticing it was organized at all. It just felt like family. That's how these things work. The structure becomes invisible because you grew up inside it. What broke it wasn't anger. I want to be clear about that because I think people expect a story like this to end in explosion, in a screaming match, in some cathartic moment of righteous fury. That's not what happened. What happened was that I pulled my credit report on a Tuesday evening, saw a number that didn't make sense, and decided to find out why. That decision, quiet, practical, almost boring, was the thing that changed everything, not bravery, just the habit of paying attention. I think about my father a lot. Raymond in his orange vest at the building supply store, sending me $200 in a note that said he knew it wouldn't cover it. He was not a good father for a long stretch of years. He was weak in a specific way that people are weak when someone they love makes their decisions for them and calls it protection. But when I put the bank records on the table at the Tim Hortons, he looked at them for a long time and then he told the truth in my aunt's backyard in front of everyone who mattered to him. That took something real. I'm not going to pretend it didn't. The thing nobody tells you about setting a boundary that actually costs something is that you have to be willing to lose the version of events where you're still hoping. I had been hoping for a long time, hoping that the next check, the next covered shortfall, the next anniversary dinner I planned and funded and attended on a fractured wrist would finally add up to something. It doesn't add up. That's not how it works. Giving from a place of wanting to be chosen doesn't buy you a seat at the table. It just teaches people where the tap is. What I have now, which I didn't have before, is the capacity to make a decision and stand behind it. Not perfectly, not without cost, but without constantly second-guessing whether I deserve to take up space. That capacity came from doing the hard thing when it would have been so much easier to let it go, renew the lease, accept the version of the story my mother was going to tell anyway. It came from being honest with my father even when honesty was inconvenient. It came from holding myself to a standard I had always held everyone else to and never quite applied to my own choices. I booked that train for one. I watched the Rockies from the window with a coffee I paid for myself and know where I needed to be and no one I owed anything to for the next 10 days. That's not a small thing. That's everything.